My name is Teresa Monroe, and I am 76 years old, an age at which most people prefer silence over confession, peace over memory. But there are stories that refuse to stay buried no matter how many decades pass, stories that sit behind the ribs like uncried tears. Today I'm finally opening a chapter I kept locked away for more than half a century. So if you're listening, stay with me. I promise you. This isn't just a story. It's a wound. It's a rebirth. And it's a truth I once wished I'd never found. I was just 16 when I met Arnold. Back then I believed every girl had one great love written into her destiny. One man whose smile could warm winters and whose arms could fix every broken thing inside you. Arnold was that man. Or at least, that's who he pretended to be. He was 21, broad-shouldered, confident in the way working men were back then. He drove trucks for a company that hired only the best of the best, as he liked to say. I was a girl who had left behind the simple life of a farm outside Chicago to move to the city with my parents, hoping for something more than chores and cornfields. The first time I saw Arnold, he was leaning against a telephone pole outside a diner, laughing with a coworker. Something about that laugh, deep, warm, careless, felt like a promise I didn't yet understand. He noticed me staring, tipped his head, and smiled with a gentleness that made me blush. 2 months later, he asked me out. 6 months later, we were married. My mother said it was too soon, that I barely knew the man. But mother's warnings rarely stop foolish hearts. And in those days, a young woman's future was simple. Find a good man, build a home, raise babies. I never imagined that a life could unravel so completely, or that a marriage could exist only on the surface, hiding oceans of secrets beneath. The start of our married life was modest, barely more than a small room behind his aunt's house. Arnold worked long hours, driving the Chicago-Indianapolis-New York route. He would disappear for 3 or 4 days at a time, sometimes even longer if he claimed the loads were delayed. I didn't question it. That's what wives did then. Trusted. Our first child, Charles, was born a year after the wedding. Then came Mary, and later Joseph. 3 children in 5 years. 3 little souls who became my entire world, while their father became more and more of a passing shadow. Still, I believed him. I believed everything, especially when he told me about his sister, Celia. According to Arnold, she lived in Indianapolis, terribly ill, unable to work. Every month, without fail, he would set aside a thick envelope of cash to help her survive, as he put it. I used to watch him write her name carefully on the front, Celia Monroe, his handwriting neat and deliberate. Whenever money became tight, whenever Charles needed new shoes, or Mary's school asked for fee contributions, I would glance at that envelope and feel a small pinch inside my chest, but I never complained. "She's my only sister, Teresa," he would say, looking at me with those steady brown eyes. "If I don't take care of her, who will?" And I would nod, because that's what a good wife did. Looking back, I realize a good wife sees the truth, not just the man's excuses. But I wasn't that woman yet. For 13 years, Arnold kept that routine. Work, absence, excuses, birthdays. He was often on the road. Holidays, overtime opportunities, family gatherings, schedules too tight. He missed moments he would never get back. Charles winning a school award, Mary's first dance recital, Joseph's broken arm. But I made peace with it. Or maybe I simply numbed myself to survival mode, telling myself that hard-working men weren't meant to be at home much. Still, one thing always felt strange. Every time I brought it up, even gently, Arnold shut it down. "She's too sick. She's too private. She doesn't like visitors." Another time, Teresa. Another time. I believed him because it was easier to believe him than to imagine he might be lying. Then came March of 1978, a month carved forever into my bones. Arnold was preparing for what he claimed was a week-long New York trip. I washed his shirts, ironed his pants, packed his socks, rituals that had become my way of belonging to a marriage that rarely belonged to me. While checking the lining of his navy blue coat, my fingers brushed something stiff in the inner pocket. I pulled it out. A simple homemade birthday card decorated with colorful dots. Inside, written in handwriting that wasn't mine. Happy birthday, my love. May God give you many more years of health, joy, and the strength to continue being the wonderful husband and father you are. With all our love, Celia and Deborah. My world froze. Husband, father, love. Who was Deborah? Arnold's birthday had been a month earlier. I remembered how uninterested he seemed in the small cake the kids and I made. How he barely reacted to the new wallet I bought him. I had thought he was tired. Now I knew he had already celebrated. With them. My hands trembled as I slipped the card into my apron. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Something in me whispered that exposing a liar requires evidence, not emotion. The next morning he kissed my forehead as usual, hugged the children, promised chocolates upon his return, and left, walking straight out the door of our life, straight into the arms of a woman I didn't yet know existed. A few days later the phone rang. Star Road Trucking Company, the voice said. Is Arnold available? No, he's in New York for a delivery, I replied. The voice paused. Ma'am, Arnold didn't take any load to New York this week. My heart stopped. That's not possible. He left Monday morning. Mrs. Monroe, the New York cargo wasn't even ready until yesterday. He didn't come to pick it up. He hasn't left Chicago at all. The room tilted. My hand shook. The floor might as well have fallen away. Where was he? Who was he with? The next days were a blur of silent panic. I searched through his drawer and found an envelope. Celia's name, but a different address. Handwritten with care. Not the address of a sick sister. An Indianapolis address belonging to someone who had something big to hide. Something larger than a lie. I wrote it down, folded it carefully, and hid it behind my wedding photo. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. 2 weeks later, Arnold claimed he had another New York trip. That was my moment. I dropped the children at our neighbor Louise's house. God bless her, for sensing something was deeply wrong, but not asking questions. I boarded a bus to Indianapolis with nothing but a small purse, a few dollars, and the birthday card that had shattered my world. The trip took 3 hours. It felt like 3 years. I stared out the window wondering whether I would find a sick sister, or a secret life, a lie, or a betrayal, a stranger, or a woman who unknowingly shared my husband. When I reached the address, my breath caught. A beautiful yellow corner house, a manicured garden, a small boutique attached to the front porch with a wooden sign. Celia's Atelier, custom clothing. Not a sick sister, a business owner, a woman flourishing, a life built on more than illness. I stepped inside, and my life, my old life, ended right there. But nothing could have prepared me for the face that greeted me next. 'Cause young girl with Arnold's eyes. The bell above the atelier door chimed, slicing through the silence as I stepped inside. Fabric rolls lined the walls like vibrant rainbows. Dresses hung on mannequins with silhouettes far more elegant than anything I'd ever been able to afford. The space smelled of lavender and new cloth, peaceful, warm. Nothing like the chaos swirling inside my chest. Then I saw her. A girl, maybe 14, walked out from the back room, her braids swaying gently behind her. She had soft brown hair, a scattering of freckles, and eyes the exact shade of Arnold's. Not just similar, identical. "Good morning, ma'am," she chirped, completely unaware that her existence alone was a dagger. "Are you looking for something special today?" Her voice, sweet, innocent, stabbed me deeper. I stood frozen, staring like I'd been struck by lightning. She tilted her head. "Just like Charles, my son," tilts his. "Just like Arnold does when he's waiting for an answer." "Ma'am?" she repeated. I swallowed, my throat raw. I'm looking for Celia." At that name, her face brightened. "Oh, Mom just went to get new fabrics. But my dad's home. I can call him if you want." "Dad!" The word detonated inside me like a bomb. Before I could breathe, she called toward the hallway. "Dad! Someone's here to see you." Footsteps. Heavy, familiar footsteps. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Then, he appeared in the doorway. Arnold froze. Absolutely froze. His travel bag wasn't in his hand. His uniform wasn't on. His skin drained of color, as if every drop of blood knew it had been caught. "Teresa?" He choked, barely a whisper. For a split second, time stood still. The atelier faded, the colors dulled, the sounds vanished, and all that remained was the truth we had both run from for far too long. The girl, Deborah, looked between us with furrowed brows. "You two know each other?" Her question sliced deeper than any accusation ever could. Arnold opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the front door swung open. "Arnold, honey, I found that lace Mrs. Hudson wanted." A woman's voice sang cheerfully. "They only had a few yard." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. Her eyes widened. Her smile died. Her hands trembled, the fabric bag sliding from her fingers to the floor. This was Celia. Not sick, not bedridden, not fragile. Beautiful, elegant, alive. Every lie I'd swallowed for 13 years twisted into something ugly inside my stomach. Arnold, voice cracking, muttered, "Celia, this is Teresa." Celia's breath hitched as comprehension flooded her face. "Teresa," she whispered, "your wife?" She didn't even finish the question, because the answer was already carved across my expression. My knees felt weak. My hands trembled. I reached into my purse, pulled out the birthday card, and held it up like a weapon. "This," I whispered, "was in his coat." Celia stared at it as if it were a snake. Deborah looked between all of us, fear growing in her eyes. "Mom? Dad, what's going on?" Celia took a shaky breath. "Sweetheart, maybe you should go to your room." "No," I said, surprising even myself with the sharpness of my voice. She deserves the truth as much as I do. I turned to Deborah, my voice cracking with the weight of what I was about to say. "My name is Teresa Monroe. I have been married to Arnold for 13 years. We have 3 children together." The girl's face twisted in horror. No, she whispered. "Dad, tell me she's lying." Arnold ran a hand over his face, that exact gesture he always made when cornered, a gesture I once thought was endearing. "Deborah, sweetheart, listen, Tell me she's lying." Her voice cracked, her innocence shattered, and Arnold said nothing, because there was nothing left to hide. Celia stepped back as if trying to keep from collapsing. How long, Arnold?" Arnold couldn't even meet her eyes. I answered instead. "Since 1965, Celia gasped. Deborah sobbed. "And the money?" I demanded. "The money you said went to your sick sister. The money we needed for our children?" His silence was the confirmation. All those years, When I patched school uniforms instead of buying new ones. When Mary cried because she couldn't join dance class. When Charles wore shoes with cardboard inside. When Joseph begged for a toy he never got. Our money had built this house, this atelier, this life. Celia's legs buckled and she dropped into a chair. "Arnold told me you were a teacher," she whispered. "That you had a good income, that you didn't need his help." I laughed, a broken, sharp sound. "A teacher? I barely finished middle school. I sew clothes to pay our bills." Celia's eyes filled with tears. "He told me he stayed with you because of a pension from your late husband. He said he couldn't legally remarry yet." The room spun. So many lies, layer upon layer. And the cruelest part? Each lie was designed to make one woman sympathize with him and resent the other. He set us up like pieces on a board, never realizing women, once awakened, are not pawns, but storms. "I have one more thing to say," I whispered. They looked at me, broken, trembling. "I'm pregnant." Arnold's head jerked up. Shock carved itself across his features. You're what?" 14 weeks, I said quietly. I found out just days before that card. Celia covered her face with her hands. Deborah began sobbing again. And Arnold, the man who created this hell, looked absolutely powerless, as if life had finally called in his debt. I straightened my back. "I'm going back to Chicago. When you come home, don't. Your clothes will be outside. You will not step through my door again." "Teresa, please." "No." The word came out firm, unshaking, forged in fire. "For 13 years I gave you my faith, my loyalty, my entire youth. No more." I turned to Celia and Deborah. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. None of us did." Then I walked out of the atelier, out of their lives, out of the ashes of a marriage that had already died long before I knew it. The bus ride back to Chicago was the longest journey of my life. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream. Grief doesn't always erupt. It often seeps. A quiet, poisonous seep that sits behind your ribs and takes years to drain. I watched raindrops slide down the bus window, blurring everything beyond. That was my heart. Blurred, soaked, unable to see what came next. I pressed a hand to my belly. My baby, my 4th child. A child of betrayal, but also a child of hope. And in that moment I made a promise to myself. I would raise my children myself. I would not beg a liar for love. I would not allow his betrayal to bury me. My life, my real life, was about to begin. But betrayal is never a single wound. What came after? Arnold's disappearance, poverty, judgment, rebuilding, was far more painful than the truth I uncovered in Indianapolis. And yet, that pain would become the foundation of an empire I never expected to build. When the bus rolled back into Chicago that night, the city lights looked different. Colder, sharper, almost hostile. For the first time in 13 years, I wasn't returning home as a wife waiting for her husband. I was returning as a woman carrying a secret that threatened to crush her from the inside. I picked up the children from Louise's house. She took one look at my face and knew something had shattered in me. But she didn't push. Not yet. Maybe she sensed I was too fragile to say the words out loud. "Mom, you look tired," Charles whispered as we walked home. Tired wasn't the word. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out parts of me and left only the shell. I tucked the kids into bed early, kissed their foreheads, and promised them everything was fine. And promised them everything was fine. But once I closed the door to their small shared bedroom, my knees buckled. I slid down the wall and sobbed silently, my body shaking with the force of it. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just shock. It was grief. Grief for the woman I used to be. Trusting, hopeful, blind. That woman died in Indianapolis. Arnold was supposed to return Sunday night, then Monday, then Tuesday. He never did. Instead, on the third day, the phone rang again. Mrs. Monroe. It was the trucking company. We regret to inform you that Arnold resigned. He left his truck, keys, and a letter. No explanation. Resigned, disappeared, left, just like that. I held the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. A cold, numbing clarity washed through me. He wasn't coming back. Not to me. Not to the children. Not even to retrieve the life he had built here. Cowardice comes in many forms. His was vanishing when truth finally demanded accountability. For days I waited, not because I wanted him back, but because I needed closure, needed to see his face one last time so that every question could be flung at him like stones. But that moment never came. Arnold had run, and now I was alone, with 3 young children and another growing inside me. Bills don't wait for heartbreak to heal. Within a week, the fridge was nearly empty, and my savings, small, pitiful, sat in an envelope that felt as light as a feather when I held it. I had to do something. Anything. Sewing became more than a skill. It became my lifeline. I took in repairs, hems, torn sleeves, loose waistbands. I knocked on doors, visited neighbors, offered my services at markets. Some pitied me. Some judged me. Some whispered things they were too cowardly to say out loud. But work trickled in. One night, as I sat hunched over my old machine, Mary peeked into the living room. "Mom, why are you still awake?" "I have to finish these pants, sweetheart." She patted over, sleepy-eyed. "Does Daddy know you're working so much?" My throat tightened. How could I tell her that her father had abandoned all of us? "He's busy," I whispered. "But we'll be okay." She nodded sleepily and hugged me. That small embrace felt like a bandage over a wound still pouring blood. Gossip travels faster than grief. By the end of the month, the whispers were everywhere. "Did you hear? Arnold left. She's pregnant too. Poor thing. I always said something was off about him. She must have done something to drive him away. I avoided the market for days. Avoided the street corner where the women liked to gather. Avoided everyone except Louise, who stayed steady as a lighthouse. One afternoon, she marched into my house with a basket of groceries. "You're not doing this alone, Teresa," she said firmly. I broke down again, something I would do often in those days, and she held me like a sister. "You will rise from this," she promised. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will." I didn't believe her yet, but her words planted a seed, a small, stubborn seed, that would grow in the years to come. One evening in late April, the phone rang. "This is Celia." My breath caught. "How did you—" "We found your number in one of Arnold's old papers," she said softly. "I hope that's not a problem." My voice trembled. "No, not a problem." A long silence followed, the kind of silence where 2 women sit on opposite ends of pain, unsure how to step toward each other. "He left us too," she finally whispered. A strange heaviness settled over me. "He did." "Yes. He left a note that said he didn't deserve either of us, that he needed to start over, whatever that means." "Of course he did. Starting over was easy for someone who never took responsibility for the life he already had." "How is Deborah?" I asked quietly. "She's devastated." Her voice cracked. She keeps asking why her father chose to disappear twice. First by lying about you, and now by running from both families. Yes, he left a note that said he didn't deserve either of us, that he needed to start over, whatever that means. Of course he did. Starting over was easy for someone who never took responsibility for the life he already had. "How is Deborah?" I asked quietly. "She's devastated." Her voice cracked. She keeps asking why her father chose to disappear twice. First by lying about you, and now by running from both families. "I will," I promised. "And if you find anything first," I added, "please do the same." "I will, Teresa." When we hung up, I felt something new. Something complicated. Solidarity. Not with the woman who stole my husband, but with the woman he lied to, used, manipulated, just as he had done to me. In August of 1978, my baby girl was born. Beatrice. Her arrival felt like a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. She was tiny, feisty, and loud, crying with the strength of a giant. I held her close, kissed her soft forehead, and whispered, "You will never live in the shadow of someone else's lies." But childbirth alone didn't soften reality. If anything, it sharpened it. More mouths to feed, more bills, more responsibility. I began taking in more sewing work. Anything I could get. I stitched until my fingers bled, waking before dawn and working until midnight. The house was always filled with the hum of the sewing machine and the quiet weight of endurance. And somehow, slowly, painfully, things began to settle. Not comfortably, but stably. In 1979, I filed for divorce. The process was humiliating. A woman alone in the 70s was often treated as if she'd failed at life, even when she was the one wronged. But the law allowed abandonment as grounds, so the judge signed the papers. Just like that, my marriage became a memory held together by cracked edges. I didn't know whether Arnold was alive or dead, or starting a third family somewhere across the country. I stopped caring. What mattered was that I was free. Free to rebuild. Free to protect my children. Free to reinvent myself. One of my regular customers, Mrs. Wilson, a sharp-tongued, wealthy woman who owned a small fabric store, noticed my sewing skills. One afternoon she asked, "Teresa, how would you feel about helping me expand my business? I need someone with good eyes and good hands." I nearly cried. The job paid more than the factory and allowed me to create designs instead of just patching them. I accepted, and it changed everything. I spent mornings at her shop, afternoons doing personal sewing orders, nights caring for the kids. And for the first time since Arnold left, life felt manageable. Then Celia called again. "Teresa, I'm in trouble." Her atelier was failing. Debts piled up, suppliers cut ties. And without Arnold's income, she and Deborah were about to lose their home. I remember staring at the phone, torn between old wounds and new empathy. Before I could overthink, I heard myself say, "Come to Chicago. I'll help you." Celia arrived 2 weeks later with Deborah and 2 suitcases. Everything they owned. We weren't friends. Not yet, but we understood each other's pain in a way no one else could. I introduced Celia to Mrs. Wilson, who hired her as a salesperson. Deborah entered the same school as my children. The first months were awkward. Mary struggled to understand who Deborah was. Charles, sharp and observant, kept his distance. But something miraculous happened. Slowly the children bonded, and slowly so did Celia and I. Not as rivals, not as the two halves of Arnold's deception, but as women rebuilding themselves from the same wreckage. We were not broken enemies, we were survivors, and soon we became something more. partners. In 1981, Mrs. Wilson announced she was retiring and selling her fabric store. The price was high, way beyond what I had. But something inside me, something fierce and long buried, knew this was my chance. I looked at Celia. What if we do this together? You and me. Her eyes widened. You'd trust me that much? It wasn't you who lied to me, I said softly. It was him. We bought the store through installments, loans, and faith we barely had. We renamed it New Beginning Clothing. It wasn't just a business. It was a resurrection. 2 women forced into each other's lives by betrayal, now building a future with their own hands. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. Celia felt hope. Our children felt hope. But fate wasn't done testing us. Not even close. Just as our new life finally began to bloom, disaster struck. An illness that would shake our family to its core and force me to face pain even deeper than betrayal. By 1983, New Beginning Clothing wasn't just a shop anymore. It was the beating heart of 2 families who had risen from the ashes of one man's destruction. The new store space we moved into was 3 times larger than the original fabric shop. Bright, airy windows displayed our best pieces. Bolts of fabric lined the walls like vibrant tapestries. Laughter from our seamstresses filled the back rooms. Every stitch felt like defiance. Every sale felt like a victory. Celia handled customers with a calm confidence I envied. She could talk anyone into believing they needed a new blouse, even if they walked in for a zipper repair. I spent my days behind the sewing machines, sketching designs, measuring clients, teaching Mary how to cut patterns. The store was thriving. Our children were growing. Life, after years of fear and shame, was finally starting to feel gentle again. But life has a cruel habit of testing you just when you start to breathe. It began with headaches. Simple, ordinary headaches. At least that's what Celia insisted. She brushed them off with a smile. Just fatigue, Teresa. I'm overworked. Then came the exhaustion. Not normal exhaustion from long days on your feet. This was deeper. A kind of weariness that settled into her bones. There were mornings she couldn't get out of bed. Afternoons when she stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. One evening after closing the store, I found her sitting alone in the back room, staring at a dress she'd been working on. "Does this color feel sad to you?" she murmured. It wasn't the question that alarmed me. It was the emptiness in her voice. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Celia, what's going on?" She forced a smile, but her eyes glistened. "I'm just tired." But I knew tired. We had both lived tired. This was something else. In early 1991, after months of convincing, I finally dragged her to the doctor. She sat stiffly in the chair while the doctor asked questions. Headaches? Yes. Fatigue? Yes. Appetite? Gone. Weight loss? Yes. Pain? Sometimes. Lumps? She hesitated. My heart dropped. The doctor examined her quietly, professionally. Then she said the 4 words that hollowed out the room. "We need more testing." Celia squeezed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. The results came a week later. The doctor sat across from us, her face solemn. "Celia, the biopsy confirms breast cancer." Time stopped. Air vanished. The world turned silent. Celia's breathing grew shallow. My own heart splintered inside my chest. But the doctor wasn't finished. "I'm afraid it's already in an advanced stage." Advanced. Advanced. The word echoed like a scream trapped in a small room. Celia didn't cry. Not then. She just stared at the wall, numb, like a person watching her world collapse in slow motion. I wanted to be strong for her. I wanted to say something comforting. But my voice refused to work. Finally, she whispered the only thing she managed to process. I have to tell Deborah. Deborah was 25 when she learned her mother was dying. I sat with her while Celia delivered the news. Deborah clapped a hand over her mouth, choking on a gasp. No. Mom. No, you can't. Mom, please. Celia tried to comfort her, but Deborah collapsed into her arms, sobbing like the world had ended. And in many ways, it had, for all of us. Deborah was 25 when she learned her mother was dying. I sat with her while Celia delivered the news. Deborah clapped a hand over her mouth, choking on a gasp. No. Mom. No, you can't. Mom, please. Celia tried to comfort her, but Deborah collapsed into her arms, sobbing like the world had ended. And in many ways, it had, for all of us. I went with her to every appointment, holding her hand through every needle, every wave of nausea, every moment her body betrayed her. On the days she felt well enough to work, she sat at the front counter with a scarf wrapped around her bald head, still smiling at customers. Sometimes, in the quiet of the hospital waiting room, she would lean her head on my shoulder. I'm scared, Teresa. I know. What if I don't make it? I swallowed hard. Then you'll go knowing you changed lives. She squeezed my hand. You saved mine first. I looked at her, confused. You showed up in that shop, Teresa, she whispered, on the worst day of my life, and somehow, that day became the beginning of everything good. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not when she needed every ounce of my strength. Celia fought like a warrior. She fought with dignity, grace, and fire. For a while it seemed she might win. After 2 years of treatment, her scans showed remission. We celebrated quietly, not wanting to tempt fate. She returned to work part-time, her scarves replaced with soft curls. But in late 1993, the fatigue returned. By spring of 1994, the cancer was back, angrier, faster, unforgiving, metastatic. There was nothing left to operate on. One night, as I helped her into bed, she whispered, "Promise me something." What? Take care of Deborah. A beat. And let her take care of you. I pressed my forehead against hers and wept for the first time since the diagnosis. I promise. Celia passed away on a quiet morning in May 1995. The sun was barely rising, painting her bedroom in soft gold. She lay propped on pillows, her hand resting in mine, her breathing shallow, but peaceful. Deborah was on her other side, whispering stories through tears, memories of birthdays, laughter, the first dress Celia ever made her. Celia's fingers twitched, her eyes fluttered open. She looked at us, really looked, and gave the faintest smile. Family, she whispered, one word, one truth. Then her chest rose once more, and didn't fall again. The silence that followed was unbearable. Deborah broke first, collapsing onto her mother's chest with a wail I will never forget. A sound of raw, primal heartbreak. I wrapped my arms around her and we cried together, shaking, grieving, clinging. We buried Celia a week later under a small oak tree on a hill overlooking the city. The funeral was simple, just family, employees, and friends whose lives she had touched. I stood beside Deborah as the casket lowered. She wasn't supposed to leave yet, Deborah whispered. No, I said, wiping her tears. But she left a legacy, sweetheart. In you. In us. Deborah leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time I felt like her mother too. After Celia's death, the house felt quieter. The store felt emptier. The world felt heavier. Deborah moved in with me and the children without hesitation. It wasn't even a discussion. Just a natural continuation of the bond Celia had built with us. Charles, now a young adult, took it upon himself to handle the store's finances. Mary threw herself into designing new pieces as a way to cope. Joseph became the cheerful face customers saw, using his charm to lift the store's spirits. And me? I navigated loss the only way I knew. Through work, through service, through the hands that had carried me through every trial life had thrown at me. But every night after the kids went to bed, I would sit quietly in my room, staring at the empty chair where Celia used to sit and chat while I fixed buttons or stitched hems. Her absence wasn't just a missing person. It was a missing piece of me. It wasn't long before I realized something extraordinary. Celia wasn't gone. Not really. She lived in Mary's sketches, in the way Deborah organized the books, in the laughter of our seamstresses, in every stitch of the business we built together. She also lived in the strength she awakened in me. Celia had helped transform me from a terrified girl into a woman who believed, even in small ways, that she could shape her own destiny. By 1996, the store had grown into a thriving company. We hired more seamstresses, expanded our tailoring services, and even began designing uniforms for local businesses. But the biggest transformation happened inside our home. We weren't two families anymore. Not mine and hers. Not his children, and her child. We were one. A new kind of family. Built not from blood but from the ashes of shared pain. And life in its strange, unpredictable way was preparing to stretch our resilience even more. After Celia's passing, I bought a larger house. Something big enough for all of us. It had a wide porch, a small garden, and enough rooms, so no child ever had to sleep on a couch again. Deborah hesitated when I offered her her own room. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I don't want to intrude." I took her hand. "This house is yours as much as mine." Her expression crumbled, and she hugged me tightly, something she rarely did. That night, for the first time in years, our house felt full again. Not with noise, but with the quiet warmth of unity. By the late 90s, everything Celia and I had dreamed of was coming true. Charles graduated engineering school, with honors. Mary became a fashion designer with ideas far beyond her age. Joseph married young, but remained dedicated to helping run the business. Beatrice, once a baby born into crisis, grew into a fierce young woman determined to become a lawyer. And Deborah, she became the backbone of our business, our financial mind, our organizational genius, the daughter of Celia, but also the daughter life had given me. Every Sunday we still set a place for Celia at the table, a simple flower and a candle, a reminder that love doesn't end, it transforms. And though we were stronger than ever, life had one more storm waiting on the horizon, one that would test our unity again, this time on a scale none of us could have expected. Just when our family finally found peace, the past returned, and not as a memory, but as a threat, and it forced me to confront something I thought was long buried. Arnold. By the time we entered the early 2000s, our family was living a life I once believed belonged only in dreams. The business was thriving, my children were carving their own paths, and Deborah, once the daughter of a secret, had become the glue that held so much together. We had survived betrayal. We had survived poverty. We had survived illness and death. We had learned to rebuild, to forgive, to create beauty from grief. I thought the worst of my life was behind me. But life has a way of circling back to test what you think is healed. Sometimes the ghosts we think we've buried were never dead to begin with, only waiting. It arrived on a cold January morning in 2001, a plain white envelope, no return address, no stamp, hand-delivered into our shop's mailbox. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but the moment I opened the envelope and saw the name inside, my stomach dropped so violently I had to sit down. To Teresa Monroe, from someone you once loved. Please read. Arnold. The name hit me like a blow to the chest, like a fist made of memories I had worked decades to forget. Celia's death, the business, the children's growth, all of it had filled my life so completely that I hadn't thought about Arnold in years, truly. He had become a shadow, a blurred face, a man who once held my heart and then crushed it under his heel. But seeing his name again, my hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Teresa, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to face what I ran from. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't expect a reply, but I'm dying, and I need to tell you the truth. My breath caught. The shop around me faded. The sounds, the colors, the people, all disappeared. I left because I was ashamed. I wasn't strong enough to face the disaster I had created. The lies consumed me, and I became someone I didn't recognize. When I realized the double life would unravel, I panicked. Cowardice isn't an excuse, but it is the truth. I ran, because I didn't know how to stay. Coward? Yes, I had known that long ago. But the next words made my heart stop. I am sick, Teresa. Very sick. And before I die, I want to see my children, if they will allow it. My hands shook so violently, I almost dropped the letter. See his children? After decades. After abandoning not one but two families. I felt anger rise inside me like wildfire. How dare he? After everything he destroyed. How dare he? Yet beneath the anger was something unexpected. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but a strange, unsettling ache. Not for him as a man, but for the unanswered questions his death would leave behind. For Charles, for Mary, for Joseph, for Beatrice, for Deborah. Children grow into adults, but the wound of an absent parent remains a quiet, lifelong bruise. That night I gathered them, my four and Deborah, around the dining table. They sensed something was wrong instantly. The air was heavy, still, tense. I received a letter today, I began. They all watched me, eyes wide. It was from your father. A shocked silence filled the room. Joseph's jaw clenched. Mary looked down at her hands. Beatrice, always the boldest, whispered, "He's alive?" I nodded. Deborah swallowed hard, her face paling. Even after all these years, Arnold's name still held power over her. "He wants to see you," I said softly. "No." Charles's voice was sharp, immediate. "He left us. He doesn't get to come back now that he's dying." Mary nodded, tears welling. "He doesn't deserve anything from us." But then Joseph surprised me. What if we need answers, Mom? What if we're the ones who need closure?" His voice cracked on the last word. Deborah looked torn. Her mother's death still a wound, her father's absence a deeper one. Beatrice crossed her arms. "Does he say why he left? Really?" I nodded slowly. "He says he was ashamed and sick." "Sick with guilt or sick with karma?" Beatrice muttered. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Her fire reminded me so much of who I had become. For nearly an hour we debated. Each child spilled emotions they had buried for decades. Abandonment, anger, confusion, curiosity. Deborah finally whispered, "If he dies without seeing us, will that haunt us the rest of our lives?" It was that question that ended the argument. The next morning I wrote back. Arnold asked to meet us in a hospice 2 hours outside Chicago. The drive there felt heavy, suffocating, The children were silent, wrestling with emotions they'd never spoken aloud. When we arrived, a nurse led us to a small room that smelled of antiseptic and fading life. And there he was, Arnold, a shell of the man I once knew, thin, gray, fragile, breathing through a small oxygen tube. His eyes, once warm, confident, charming, were sunken, haunted. He looked up when we entered, his hands trembling. "Teresa," his voice was barely a whisper. "You came." "I didn't come for you," I said quietly. "I came for them." He nodded, tears forming instantly. Then his gaze moved to the children. One by one, recognition flickered. Pain, regret, a lifetime of words unsaid. Charles stepped forward first. "Why did you leave?" His voice was steady, but his hands were fists. Arnold swallowed. "I was a coward. I thought disappearing would hurt you less than a confession." Charles's eyes filled with tears he didn't let fall. "You ruined Mom's life." Arnold cried then. Silent, broken tears. "I know, and I regret it every day." Mary stepped forward next. "Did you love us? Any of us?" A question no child should ever have to ask. Arnold's face crumpled. "With everything I had. But love isn't enough when a man is weak." Weak. That was the truest thing he ever said. Then Deborah approached. The girl he hid. The daughter he denied. The one who grew up with half-wit love. She whispered, "You left us too." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, tears streaming. "I know," he cried. "I failed you worst of all." Joseph asked nothing. He simply stared, disappointed, as if the man in the bed was not worth the confrontation. Beatrice, the youngest, stepped up last. "You are not my father," she said quietly. "You're just the man who walked away." Arnold nodded, sobbing harder because he couldn't argue with truth. After a while, I spoke. "Why now, Arnold?" He looked at me with every regret weighing down his gaze. "Because I didn't want to die without taking responsibility." "Responsibility?" My voice shook with anger. "You think a meeting erases years of suffering?" "No," he whispered. "But maybe it eases some of the questions." I took a shaky breath. "Questions don't hurt as much as the silence you left." He closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his cheek. "I am sorry, Teresa. Truly. You deserved a better man than me." And then, with a voice so thin it nearly vanished, "Thank you for raising them so well." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. We left the hospice quietly. He died 3 days later. Grief is strange. None of us wanted Arnold back, yet his death hit each child in different ways. Charles became softer, gentler. Mary dove into her designs with renewed passion. Joseph started helping at the store, even more. Beatrice, though fierce, spent nights journaling her feelings. Deborah cried quietly, mourning the possibility of the father he never became. And me? I didn't feel relief or joy or sorrow. I felt release, as if a chain I didn't know was still wrapped around me had finally fallen off. But Arnold wasn't the only ghost his death released. A week after the funeral, a lawyer came to our shop. He carried documents, legal documents. Arnold had debts, massive debts, loans taken under false names, credit cards opened with fraudulent information. And one account had my name forged as a secondary holder. I felt the world spin. All these years the past had been waiting to strike. The lawyer explained that although Arnold was gone, creditors were not. Collections agencies, banks, state departments. They wanted answers. They wanted money. And they were coming for us. For me. for the business Celia and I built. The final storm had begun. To save my family, my home, and my legacy, I had to fight harder than ever before, not against Arnold this time, but against the consequences he left behind. And what happened next would reshape our family forever. Grief is complicated, especially when the person you're mourning was never fully yours, and perhaps never fully anyone's. Arnold's death left behind questions, but even more frightening. Responsibilities that weren't mine, shadows from a past I didn't choose. For weeks after the lawyer's visit, I felt a kind of dread I hadn't known since the early days of Arnold's disappearance. The fear that someone could take everything Celia and I built. The fear that this time, our efforts would collapse under a weight that wasn't even ours. I stood inside the shop late one night, long after our employees had left. The sewing machines sat silent, the fabrics neatly folded, the mannequins wearing our newest spring designs. A business built from the ashes of hurt, now threatened by a man no longer alive. I pressed my palms against the cutting table and whispered, "I won't let him destroy us twice." The next week was filled with meetings, attorneys, financial advisors, bank officers. Every conversation was heavy with words I never wanted to learn. Liability, fraud, probate claims, contesting estates, forged consent. It felt like stepping into a battlefield without armor. But I wasn't alone. Charles handled the financial strategy. Mary made sure the shop continued running, while we sorted chaos. Joseph stood beside me at every legal meeting. Beatrice dug through statutes and precedents like a seasoned lawyer, even though she was still in school. Deborah, quiet, steady Deborah, kept the business books clean and organized, preparing documents the lawyers said would have taken weeks. Our family stood like a fortress. One attorney, Mr. Barlow, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, sat down with us after reviewing Arnold's forged documents. His words changed everything. "These signatures, they aren't yours, Mrs. Monroe. They are almost laughably poor attempts to imitate your writing. With this evidence, you are not liable for a single one of his debts." I stared at him, breath held. "None?" I whispered. "None," he repeated with certainty. "You are legally clear." Deborah exhaled sharply. Joseph slumped back in relief. Mary covered her mouth with trembling hands. I felt my knees weaken. After a lifetime of fighting battles that weren't mine, after years of trying to erase shadows that followed me, after the trauma of betrayal, the sorrow of loss, the fear of starting over, I was finally free, legally, emotionally, spiritually. Arnold's debts were not mine. His burdens were not mine. His choices were not mine. That night, for the first time in decades, I slept without fear of what tomorrow would demand from me. With the legal crisis behind us, the business flourished more than ever. It was as if the universe, after observing my years of suffering, finally said, "You've done enough. Now it's time to breathe." By 2003, New Beginning Clothing had expanded into a second location. By 2005, we started an official fashion line, Celia's Legacy, in honor of the woman who had helped build the foundation of my life's work. Every label had a small embroidered letter, C, near the hem. Customers adored it, not knowing the depth behind it. Deborah cried when she saw the first sample. This keeps her alive," she whispered. "It always will," I said softly. Business boomed. Celebrities wore our pieces. Local news did stories on our journey. Women from all backgrounds came to us, not just for dresses, but for the sense of strength stitched into every seam. Our family had built something unbreakable. In 2007, after almost 30 years alone, I received a surprise I never expected. His name was Arthur Bellman, a retired carpenter who came into the shop needing a suit repaired. He was gentle, kind, slow to speak, soft in his laughter. He returned 2 days later, not for his suit, but with a bouquet of lilies. "For the woman who made me look like I'm 30 again," he joked. I felt my cheeks warm. Something I hadn't felt in years. Slowly, over time, he became a fixture in our family. He treated Deborah as his own, praised Mary's designs, played chess with Charles, helped Joseph repair old furniture, brought Beatrice law books and snacks for her studies. He always asked before touching my hand. He always listened when I spoke. He always respected the ghost of my past without trying to replace it. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, he took my hands in his and whispered, "Teresa, I don't want to bring storms into your life. I only want to bring peace, if you'll allow me." Tears filled my eyes. "Arthur, you are peace." He wiped a tear from my cheek and asked, "May I stay in your life? Not to take up space, but to add to it?" And for the first time since I was a young girl, I said yes, with a full heart. We married in a small ceremony, nothing extravagant, just family, close friends, and a framed photo of Celia placed on the front row beside my children. Deborah held my bouquet. Beatrice walked me down the aisle. In that small gathering, I realized something. I wasn't starting a new life. I was continuing a beautiful one, with someone who honored what existed before him. Years passed. Our children married, had children of their own, built careers they once only dreamed of. Charles became an engineer who designed flood-resistant homes. Mary opened her own boutique under our brand. Joseph expanded our business to 3 more locations. Beatrice became a powerful attorney, fighting for women facing domestic and financial abandonment. Deborah became our official CFO, a leader whose strength came from every wound she survived. Our grandchildren filled the house with laughter and crayons and spilled juice. Every Sunday we gathered around the long dining table. 3 generations, one family forged not by blood alone, but by resilience. During one of those Sundays, as we ate, one of the grandchildren tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma," she asked innocently, "were you always this strong?" The table quieted. Everyone looked at me. I smiled gently and said the truest thing I ever learned. "No, sweetheart. I became strong because I didn't have a choice." On my 75th birthday, I sat alone on the porch for a moment, while everyone celebrated inside. Children running, music playing, generations mingling. The wind was cool, the sky painted gold, my heart full, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I never had before. Complete, no missing piece, no lingering ache, no unhealed wound. I whispered into the evening air, "Celia, we made it." And then, unexpectedly, tears came. Soft, warm, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that shaped me. Gratitude for the children who gave me purpose. Gratitude for Celia, who taught me unexpected sisterhood. Gratitude for Arthur, who taught me love without pain. Gratitude for the girl I once was, the girl who refused to stay broken. My life wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. Hard-earned, heavy-lived, worth every wound. Sometimes the wounds that break us the deepest give birth to the strongest version of ourselves. Sometimes the family we build is stronger than the one we lose. And sometimes, life waits until the end to show you why the beginning had to hurt. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or overlooked, remember this: you are not the pain you survived. You are the strength that carried you through it.